Hello, welcome to this episode of Let's Talk Death. I'm Fran Solomon.
And I'm Andy McNeil.
And we're thrilled to be your host for these conversations. Let's Talk Death is brought to you by Heal Grief, a social support network creating community after someone has died. Everything we do is inspired by our core belief that no one should ever grieve alone.
Our goal with this program is to have a friendly chat with some amazing people so that we can help normalize and educate our Heal Grief community. Our guests today are Scott and Pammy Kramer. Scott and Pammy Kramer are two parents on a mission to spread joy to kids with cancer. On January 4th, 2018, their 2.5-year-old daughter, Maddie, lost her battle after she vivaciously fought a rare form of spinal cancer. On that day, the Kramers made a promise to remember Maddie's life as an inspiration. They founded a nonprofit, Dancing While Cancering, to honor her joyful life and bright spirit, to help spread joy to other children with cancer, and remind families that there can still be joy and inspiration after diagnosis. Through Dancing While Cancering, Scott and Pammy supplied partner hospitals with smile packs, which are filled with musical instruments, a wireless speaker, room decorations, and other items to make a hospital room feel more like a home, just like they did for Maddie. In 14 months since launching, the Kramers have 14 partner hospitals in 9 states that give a smile pack to each newly diagnosed pediatric cancer patient. To mark 2 years since Maddie's death, the Kramers published their second book in her honor, The Miracles That Follow.
Pammy, Scott, we're delighted to have you as guests on our show.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you. It's a
privilege.
privilege.
So your first book, Maddies Miracles, encompasses the time between Maddie's diagnosis and the day she died. Your new book, Dancing While Cancering, shares your journey from the day Maddie died to when you found new purpose. Can you share that journey with our audience today?
Absolutely. It's really a privilege to share Maddie's journey. She was and is such a blessing in our lives. And watching to this day, watching Maddie battle her disease is and will forever be the most inspirational thing I think we ever experience. One of the most fascinating things about kids, and a theme that really weaves its way through the first book that we wrote, Maddies Miracles, is their presence, their mindfulness, in that as parents, as adults, we like to think that we are somehow more evolved. When it comes to trauma, we are not, because we are up here. We're in our heads. We think about what happened yesterday, what happened tomorrow. Maddie and other kids battling cancer or any other traumatic disease process, when they feel good, they play. And when they don't, they don't. And watching Maddie literally dancing while cancering was amazing. And she led us through every step of the way. And our hope in her first story truly was a collection of blog entries that are on our existing blog called Maddies Miracles is the name of the blog itself. It's a WordPress blog. And it was initially just an outreach effort to keep our family and friends in the loop. And ultimately, it turned into inspirational vignettes of these little gifts that Maddie delivered to us each and every single day. And each reads as its standalone inspirational moment, because that's what Maddie gave us, that through the worst in life, she delivered the best in humanity. And
it's interesting. It's gifts that she gave to you, but now you've also passed those gifts to others through the blog and through your writing. So it really is. It's a gift that's even broader than even the two of you, it sounds like, too.
And so much of that is part and parcel. We, on January 4th of 18, when Maddie passed, so just just a little after 3.5 years old, we were sitting in her room, a room where outside sat a Mickey Mouse, life-size Mickey Mouse decal right outside the room. Something that for those who dip their toes into Maddie's journey will find was very fitting for her. Pammy and I looked at each other that day and said we were going to do everything we can to make sure that this is not the end, that we honor her and that we commit ourselves to ensuring that her life is remembered as an inspiration, that when people hear Maddie's name, that they're not looking away, they're looking at us and smiling and feeling those gifts that she gave and continues to give. And in that way, she lives on through the legacy that we've been blessed to create for her in a way that brings joy to others through the foundation work in Dancing While Cancering. And I hope through our writings brings inspiration and awareness to those dealing with grief.
So I have a question. You're still both very young in your journey with grief.
Mm.
The coping, I suspect, especially initially, was very difficult. What guided you to use this writing and this journey that you've embarked on in her memory to use as your coping?
Maddie. Truly, we started this blog, like I said, just to try to keep family and friends in the loop. But a message popped up that day and it said, "What is the purpose of your website?" And not sort of what we're expecting to be asked. We joked so that we're going to get less text messages and we're going to be able to tell our family and friend what's going on. But I couldn't write that. So it came to me, the feeling I actually felt when I had to type it in was to write to memorialize the daily miracles that Maddie's journey might bring or will bring. And in some ways, the moment I wrote that, it created a little bit of a lens through which we viewed the world. Because while we're early in the stage of the grief process from the sense of timing of Maddie's passing, we're not in the stage of her journey. And in particular, when Maddie was diagnosed, it was April of 2017. It was an emergency. Happy, healthy 2.5-year-old little girl. Beautiful, everything you could ever want in a daughter. And we walked her into an emergency room thinking she had a cold. We found out at midnight that she had a tumor covering 4 levels of her spinal cord, and we didn't know whether she would survive that night. And so for us, as we sort of reflect on what has transpired, we went through probably a mini grief cycle on her diagnosis, not knowing if she was going to survive. If she did survive, we didn't know whether she would walk again. And thankfully, the first of sort of the many real emotional miracles that we experienced was our little girl walking within 2 weeks. And that upward trajectory and watching her take rock bottom and bring to it smiles, laughter, and a lot of unexpected dancing, that carried us all the way through.
And still does.
I'm going to touch on something that may be unexpected. You two seem to be very connected in this journey. But unfortunately, for many couples that have a child die, it is a real divisible journey within the family. How is that for the two of you? Were you always feeling connected in your grief? Did you feel as though you were grieving similarly, the same? Can you help us understand that?
Yeah, we've actually talked about this quite a bit, but just because sometimes I'm feeling something and Scott isn't, or Scott is and I'm not. And I think sometimes we are feeling the same things at the same time. So I think that we've just both kept an open communication line on what we're thinking and feeling, and it's been very natural that that's happened. But just being fully understanding that it's okay to feel really raw at some point, and it's okay if you're not feeling really raw at some point, and that we've just been able to grieve together in that way, even if we're not having the same exact feelings at the same time. But I can absolutely understand that that's not always the case. And after going through this, it's definitely understandable that different people have different reactions. We're all human and made up differently, at least, that's my take. But I'm not a psychologist, so I don't know the real answer. But it brings out so many different emotions, and everyone handles the death of a child differently. And thankfully, both of us have always been within the spectrum of a wavelength that we've been able to understand and empathize with each other if we're not feeling in the exact same way at the same exact time.
Yeah.
Well, and it sounds like to me, even just hearing you describe that, it is to be able to empathize with one another is a tremendous gift that you give one another, certainly. But also just being able to be patient with one another. If you're not in that place at that time, that you're okay that person is. Sometimes, so many times conflict happens when we, number one, don't empathize, but also when we just can't, we're just not patient with that, with that person.
Yeah.
As they're going through that. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think part of what has helped us move forward in that sense is, thankfully, we both share unabashedly our love for Maddie and our appreciation for the beauty that we did experience with her. And that's something that is 11 out of 10 for both of us. And so I think equally so, we obviously both recognize that the pain is also 11 out of 10. And because of that, in those moments that we're not necessarily grieving at the same pace or at the same way, that's the place to go back to, is that, if with 11 out of 10 on both of those, it's okay if it's not identical at that moment.
And if I recall, you have another child?
Yes, we have another little daughter named Lily, who, when Maddie was diagnosed, was only 10 weeks old.
Oh.
So we are very blessed that we had some family step in.
I was going to ask how she coped, but she was much younger. So how do you share the story of her sister?
Yeah. Many ways. And this is something that we weren't sure about because she is so young, but we really wanted to preserve Maddie's memory. And I'm sure everyone has a different approach after a child passes in that situation. We wanted to talk about Maddie. We still talk about her every day, and in a very funny, remember when Maddie did this, and remember when Maddie did that, and Maddie would always say this. So we didn't want to stop doing that. So we do talk about her with Lily, and we share videos on my phone with Lily so she remembers her and Maddie interacting, because we were blessed that they did get almost 1 year together. Maddie battled cancer for about 8.5 months. So she passed a month before Lily's first birthday. So they almost got 1 year together, and we have a lot of pictures, a lot of videos, and we always share them with Lily. And she loves Maddie. She thinks she's hysterical. So it's going to evolve. We know it'll change with her age, and we're just taking one day at a time on that front. And right now it's just sharing Maddie with Lily. And there's been a couple times where Lily has asked, but where is Maddie? And, we have our answers ready to go. And the one we usually say is she's right here. She's in our heart. She's with us all the time. And she loves that. So for now, that's what we're doing.
I would just like to affirm the two of you and say, I've sat with many, many families over the years and been able to see down the road when someone is an infant and they either have a parent die or a sibling die. And many times when they're around 11 or 12 years old, parents would end up bringing them to me as a counselor and saying they're very upset about the death of their sibling or about the death of their parent, but they were one when it happened. And what's interesting, and I think maybe even just you guys seem, really connected and clued in. And, in that process, by allowing her to have a relationship with Maddie, just know that she would have had one anyway, but she would have learned maybe that it was taboo if you're not talking about it, right?
Yeah.
And so then what happens is kids hold that secret in their heart, that they have questions. They want to know more about them, and I don't know them, and that's my sister. So I just want to affirm the two of you. I don't know that there's a right or wrong either, but I do know that you're never wrong when you engage your child and love your child and share the love that you have for both of your children with your child who has not passed. So
Thank you.
Anyway,
Andy, you said it much more eloquently than I was going to. I was just going to jump in and say what a gift you're giving to not only yourselves and keeping her memory so alive, but also to your daughter for the memory of her sister.
Thank you.
Truly a gift.
It's interesting that you say that, but because I think when the possibility came of creating a second story, knowing that the first book that we wrote, Maddies Miracles, concludes at least at the time of Maddie's passing, albeit with a very inspirational ellipses, we'll call it, at the end of that first story. One of the major inspirations for writing the second story, The Miracles That Follow, was to ensure that Lily had that complete story, that when the time came for her, in the age to ask questions that she's not capable of processing yet, that for her sister's story didn't end on January 4th of 18, but that she got to fully see through how did Maddie and mom and dad get from this time in life that is hard to get my head around to where we are now. And hopefully we are laying that nice foundation for her. She's already picking up, we teach her about the smile packs and the work that we're doing, and she's connecting it to Maddie, and we deliver our smile packs because Maddie used to smile when she was in the hospital. So building blocks of creating a narrative for her to make sense of taking something very complicated and making it digestible for her, which is another strength that we gained from Maddie.
Well, I will say there's someone who's written a lot on this concept of, they call it official name, continuing bonds. They call it, that we continue the bond with people who have died. Phyllis Silverman. So even for some of our listeners, if you look up Phyllis Silverman and look at some of her articles and things she wrote on children and grief and the impact, research really has found that rather than cutting strings with people who have died, it's important to keep the connections, because that's more natural to how we live. Yeah. It's not natural to cut those strings because we don't stop loving a person.
Totally.
That's amazingly said.
Yes. Totally.
So we actually only have a few minutes left. It always time really flies by in our conversations. But I did want to give the two of you an opportunity. A lot of times our listeners want to know more about how they can connect with or learn more about your writings or connect with the two of you or what you're doing or with your nonprofit. How might they go about doing that?
Yeah. Well, we love to connect with people one-on-one. Scott always says we are literally an open book, and I completely agree. So you can go to dancingwhilecancering.org and click on contact and write a message to us. It will come to our emails, and we are more than happy to engage. And then you can also go to Amazon.com and either purchase a copy of Maddies Miracles, which is the first book, and the second book is Miracles That Follow, and just enjoy being inspired by an unbelievable little toddler who taught us how to live life. And all of the royalties from the books go to cancer charities, including Dancing While Cancering. So it's really all around a great cause, great reads, great impact that we're having on bringing joy to kids with cancer, really to carry on Maddie's memory and to give back to families who are going through what we went through. And we know how very much needed that joy is in the dark moments of a battle with cancer, especially watching your child go through it.
Yeah, very difficult, and great work that you're doing. And so thank you both for that. So we want to thank you so much for being our guest here at Let's Talk Death and for sharing your journey and the story behind your book and the work that you do.
Thank you so much for having us.
Really a privilege to sit and chat with you today, and especially timing-wise, such a meaningful time of year for us, being the month around that 2-year anniversary. So to be able to take that time and spread it meaningfully is very, very special.
And thank you. I know that many who are listening to this and will listen to this certainly will be touched and find comfort even in the conversation we're having now. So for those who are joining us, we want to thank you for joining us for this episode and listening in. If you would like to learn more about Heal Grief, please visit us at healgrief.org. At healgrief.org, you can learn more about all the programs and resources of Heal Grief, including our national network of support for grieving young adults. It's a program we call Actively Moving Forward.
Make sure to sign up on healgrief.org to receive our newsletter for links to future episodes of Let's Talk Death.
And so with that, thank you for joining us, and we will see you next time on Let's Talk Death.